Imagine you're home alone. It's late at night. You hear a strange noise coming from upstairs. A creak, a whisper, a floorboard groaning under a weight that isn't yours. You tell yourself it's just the house settling. It's the pipes. It's the wind. But a small, cold part of your brain asks a terrifying question. What if it's not? What if someone else is in your house right now, listening to you breathe, watching you as you sleep? This isn't just a plot from a scary movie. This has happened. Real people have discovered that the strange sounds and missing food were not their imagination. They had an uninvited, unseen house guest living within their walls. This idea taps into one of our most basic fears. Our home is supposed to be our sanctuary. We lock the doors to feel safe. But what happens when the danger is already inside? Our first story takes us all the way back to 1941 in Denver, Colorado. Philip Peters was a 59-year-old man who lived alone. He was a wealthy widower, but lately his life had become strange. His friends noticed he seemed unwell and paranoid. He told them he felt like he was never alone in his big, empty house. Food would disappear from his icebox. The locks on his doors seemed to be tampered with from the inside. He heard noises in the walls, ceilings. His friends thought he was lonely and maybe losing his mind. They had no idea how right he was. He wasn't alone at all. On October 17, 1941, neighbors became worried when they hadn't seen Philip Peters for a while. The police were called to do a wellness check. When they entered his home, they found a truly gruesome scene. Mr. Peters was dead in his bedroom, having been brutally beaten. The house was locked from the inside and there were no signs of a break-in. It was a complete mystery. The police were stumped. They started calling him the Ghost of Denver because of the phantom-like nature of the crime and the strange reports from Peters before his death. The case went cold, and the house sat empty, holding its dark secret. Months later, another officer checking on the property heard a strange noise from upstairs. A small closet door at the top of the stairs slowly creaked open. Standing there was a man. He was shockingly thin, almost like a skeleton, dressed in rags. This was Theodore Coneys, a man who had been reported missing for months. He had created a tiny hidden nest in the back of the closet which led to a small attic crawl space above. He had been living there for 5 weeks while Philip Peters was still alive. Let's cross the ocean to Japan for our next case, which is just as creepy. This one happened in 2008 in the town of Kasuya. A man living alone began to notice strange things happening in his house. It started with food. Slices of bread would be gone. A carton of yogurt would be half empty. He knew he didn't eat it. At first, he suspected a mouse, or maybe he was just being forgetful. But it kept happening, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. He decided he wasn't going crazy, and took action. He installed security cameras inside his home, pointing them at his kitchen and refrigerator. He connected the cameras to his cell phone, so he could watch a live feed from anywhere. He went about his day, waiting. He probably expected something mundane. The truth was far more terrifying. While watching the live feed, he saw movement in his kitchen. But it wasn't a person walking in through a door or a window. Instead, he watched in absolute horror as a figure emerged from inside a top cupboard. A woman, someone he had never seen, climbed down. She went to his refrigerator. She helped herself to food. She helped herself to a drink. Then she climbed back into the cupboard and closed the door behind her. He was watching a stranger living inside his kitchen storage. Can you even imagine the shock and the fear of seeing that on your phone? He immediately called the police, who probably thought it was a prank. When they arrived, they went straight to the kitchen. They opened the top cupboard and found 58-year-old Tatsuko Horikawa. She had been living there, undetected, for a full year. She had moved a mattress pad and blankets into the small, enclosed space above the main cupboards. It was a tiny, cramped area not meant for a person. She told police she was homeless and had snuck in when a door was left unlocked. Then stayed, living like a ghost in his home. This next story from 2019 in Greensboro, North Carolina, feels like it was ripped straight from a horror movie script. A woman named Madisyn, a student at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, was living in an off-campus apartment with her roommates. They started noticing strange things. Clothes would go missing from their closets. Handprints would mysteriously appear on the bathroom wall. But the creepiest part? They kept hearing noises, rattling, thumping, a voice coming from inside their own apartment. One day, Madisyn came home and heard a noise coming from her closet. She called out, thinking it was one of her roommates. There was no answer. She opened the closet door, but it seemed empty. Still, she had a terrible feeling she wasn't alone.
"Who's there?"
And then she heard a man's voice answer her. He was inside her closet. He was wearing her clothes. She ran out of the apartment screaming and immediately called for help. When the police arrived, they searched the apartment and found a 30-year-old man named Andrew Swafford hiding in the closet. He was wearing her socks. He was wearing her pants. He was wearing her hoodie. This was not a quick break-in. The police and the roommates pieced together the disturbing timeline. They realized he had likely been living in their apartment secretly for weeks, possibly even longer. He had found a way into the crawl space. He had found a way into the ductwork of the apartment building. This allowed him to move between rooms and even apartments without being seen. He treated their home like his own personal playground. Swafford was arrested, but for the young women living there, the damage was done. They had to move out, unable to shake the terrifying knowledge that a stranger had been living among them, watching them, for weeks on end. Their home had been turned into the scene of their worst nightmare. Not all intruders are complete strangers. Sometimes they are people you know, which can make the situation even more terrifying. This was the reality for a woman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Her name has been kept private to protect her, but her story is a chilling warning. She had recently broken up with her boyfriend, Carrie Cucuzzi. She had a restraining order against him and just wanted to move on with her life. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She would hear strange noises coming from upstairs, specifically from her bedroom. Like many others, she tried to find logical explanations. Maybe it was her cats playing. Maybe the house was just old and creaky. But the feeling of being watched persisted. One day, the final straw came when she found a blanket on the floor of her bedroom. She knew she hadn't left it there. Then she noticed the toilet seat was left up. She lived with her daughters, and she knew none of them would have done that. Her heart sank as the terrifying possibility started to become real. Summoning her courage, she decided to check the one place she hadn't dared to look, the attic. The entrance was in her bedroom. She called a friend for support and carefully opened the attic door. There, hiding amongst her stored belongings, was her ex-boyfriend, Carrie Cucuzzi. He had been secretly living in her attic for 2 weeks since their breakup. He had been coming down at night while she and her daughters were asleep, moving around their home, using their bathroom, watching them. The thought is absolutely sickening. The police were called and Cucuzzi was arrested. The woman later said the most terrifying part was realizing he had been up there the whole time, listening to her every conversation, watching her every move. He was right above her bed while she slept. This case is a horrifying example of how obsession can lead to a complete and terrifying violation of a person's life and home. Sometimes it's the innocent eyes of children that uncover the darkest secrets. In 2015, a family in Columbus, Ohio, was experiencing very strange events in their new home. The mother, who chose to remain anonymous, noticed things were constantly being misplaced. Television channels would be changed, microwave settings altered overnight. She also heard faint noises from the basement. She was a single mother with 5 children and began to feel like she was losing her mind. She even changed the locks, but the strange occurrences continued. Her children were the first to see the truth. They told their mother they saw a man. His eye was peering through a small hole in the basement wall. They claimed to see a man's legs dangling from the ceiling. The mother thought their imaginations were running wild. It sounded like a child's scary story. She reassured them there were no monsters. But the children were persistent, terrified of what they had seen. The mother finally investigated the basement after her son said someone was down there. She went downstairs and looked around. Behind shelves and boxes, she found a small hidden door. It led to a utility crawl space under the house. Inside, she found evidence someone had been living there. Blankets, empty food containers, personal belongings. The children had been right. The man was real. He'd been living in their walls. The police were called. They searched the cramped space. The man was gone, but his makeshift home proved the ordeal. It was later discovered the intruder was an ex-convict, Jeremy Scurry. He'd lived in the house before prison. When released, he had nowhere to go. He returned to his old home and lived in the crawl space unknown to the family above. The family was forced to move, unable to feel safe in that house again. Imagine you're a single mother of 5 and you start hearing noises at night. This was the situation for a woman in Greenwood, South Carolina. She kept hearing thumps and bumps coming from her attic after she and her children went to bed. For months, she was terrified. She would get her gun, walk through the house, and find nothing. She started to think she was going crazy. Was it an animal? Was it just the house? Her children heard the noises too, and the entire family lived in a state of constant fear. The mystery took a terrifying turn when she noticed nails popping out of her bedroom ceiling. It looked like something, or someone, was moving around up there with enough force to push the nails out from the floorboards of the attic. Finally, she had enough. She called her nephew and asked him to come over and investigate the attic with her. They armed themselves, prepared for the worst, and slowly made their way up the attic stairs. What they found was more horrifying than any ghost or animal they could have imagined. Hiding in the attic was a man. He was asleep in a corner surrounded by makeshift bedding. But this wasn't just any man. It was her ex-boyfriend, a man she had broken up with 12 years earlier. He had been released from prison in Mexico, and instead of contacting her, he had secretly moved into her attic. He had been living up there for weeks, listening to her and her children. The most chilling detail? He had rigged the ceiling vents so he could spy on her in her own bedroom. He watched her sleep every night. The man was arrested, but the psychological trauma for the family was immense. The mother realized that every night when she was scared, listening to the noises, he was right there, just feet away. He had turned her home into his personal prison and observation deck. This story is a stark reminder that sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Our final case brings us back to Greensboro, North Carolina, and it's another story involving college students. In 2019, a group of young women in an off-campus apartment noticed things were not right. It was a familiar pattern. Clothes were disappearing and the front door was often unlocked. They felt uneasy, as if being watched. They joked about a ghost, but dread was real. It was wearing on them. One roommate, Maddie, a UNCG student, came home one afternoon and heard rattling in the closet. Same apartment complex as the earlier case, which is disturbing. Thinking it was a raccoon, she opened the closet. At first she saw bags, then clothes. But then she saw him. A man was hiding inside, wearing her clothes. She locked eyes with him, then slammed the door and ran. She and her roommate called the police, who arrived and arrested the man, Andrew Swafford. He'd apparently been released and returned to the complex to continue frogging. He had a backpack suggesting a long stay. The students were shaken, unsure how long he'd been coming and going. The discovery was a nightmare. They packed up and moved out immediately. They couldn't stay where a stranger had been living among them, going through their things, wearing their clothes. This case shows the repetitive nature of his behavior. For Swafford, it wasn't one time. It was a pattern, a horrifying hobby that violated safety, turning homes into his hiding places. After hearing these stories, it's hard not to feel a little paranoid. It's hard not to listen a little more closely to the creaks and groans of your own home at night. We've heard about the Denver Spider-Man, who lived in an attic for months after murdering the homeowner. We've heard about the woman in Japan who lived in a kitchen cupboard for a year. We've seen how obsessed ex-partners can turn an attic into a terrifying surveillance post. And we've seen how a man in North Carolina made a habit of secretly living in student apartments. These aren't urban legends. They are documented, true events. These cases prey on our deepest fears. They shatter the illusion of safety we build around ourselves. A home is more than just four walls and a roof. It's our private world. It's where we are at our most vulnerable. The idea that someone could infiltrate that space, live alongside us in secret, and watch our most private moments is a violation of the highest order. It's a psychological haunting, where the ghost is a living, breathing person hiding just out of sight, turning the familiar sounds of home into sources of terror. What drives a person to do this? In some cases, it's desperation, homelessness, and a need for shelter. In other, more sinister cases, it's about obsession, control, and a disturbing desire to invade someone else's life. The intruders are often discovered by chance. A strange noise, missing food, a child's unbelievable story, or a security camera set up to catch a completely different kind of thief.